In the early 70s, many of us were treated to a form of television explosion in Edmonton. The emergence of cable TV and the option of subscribing to up to 13 channels, including 3 U.S. networks, PBS, and local network affiliates and more, proved very acceptable to many viewers. But the concept and technology didn't just appear in 1970. Primitive cable systems were toyed with in Britain, the U.S., and Canada from as early as the late 1940s. Ed Polanski, a founder of QCTV in Edmonton, referred to in the provincial archives as the father of Alberta Cablevision, developed an early system in Athabasca, Alberta, site of one of the West's first cable operations.
Jack Pine Grove School was a new opening for me because I didn't know what school was all about, and most importantly, I didn't know how to speak English when I went to school, to grade 1. I was lucky to get a school teacher who spoke Ukrainian, and I spoke Polish to her. She understood Polish. It was extremely noticeable that, in fact, it was in grade 3 that I had started in Thorhild, how far ahead the kids were of grade 3 from Eldorina. So that stands out in my mind. The other thing, of course, there were a lot of friends in Thorhild, more than I had seen or had in the Eldorina area, and I was very grateful for all the friends that I was able to make, and those were the first memories of Thorhild. We got into organized hockey and played a lot of games, traveled a lot to other towns. It was a ball, and as far as I was concerned, I was in the major leagues, even though retrospectively, when I look at it now, there were really some bush leagues. I came by curling after I came back from Toronto, I believe, where I had been at technical school, and Thorhild community had then just built a new curling rink. So I began to curl with teams, and I got fairly proficient, and in fact played in the finals for Alberta to represent Alberta in the McDonald's Brier.
What is your name, please? Eddie Klein. And Eddie, you play the violin. How long have you been playing a fiddle?
Not very long. 2 years.
About 2 years. Did you ever play any other instrument?
No.
The wedding day was a nice day. It was warm. It was on July the 5th, 1958. The weather was beautiful. The church service was excellent. The activities at the community hall, the reception was also excellent. There was a crowd of well over 600 people that showed up. It didn't rain the day before or on the day or the day after, so it was a beautiful day. The trip to Redwater to take pictures, as they used to call it, you have to go and take pictures, and we drove to a photographer's place and spent 2 or 3 hours taking pictures. Came back to the Thorhild Hall to a reception and had a wonderful reception at which my father-in-law and mother-in-law donated to us a van, a brand new 1958 Ford van, which was our wedding gift. Overall, it was a beautiful day. We left next morning in this new van for our honeymoon trip to go to British Columbia and then south to the United States and tour as far as we could.
I first learned of cable systems after I was operating my television shop, and I read an article about underground coaxial systems going in the United States. This would have been perhaps in 1953 or 1954. That was my first contact with coaxial cable. I then pursued it, and within perhaps a year or two, I made a proposal to install cable television for the town of Athabasca, which was one of the first systems in the province, and I installed that in 1959. It was in service in 1960, and that's really the start of cable in this province.
Once I had decided that I would install a cable system in Athabasca, I then pursued the issue of where do I acquire some towers. I filed a bid with the Crown Assets Disposal Corporation, which is an agency of the federal government of Canada and also of the U.S. Treasury, who were disposing of towers at a radar site in Anzac, Alberta, that's near Fort McMurray. As it turned out, the Anzac towers I brought back with the help of my father-in-law and a crew of men who helped load and haul that equipment to Thorhild. We brought it in a convoy of 9 trucks and a Caterpillar and all sorts of equipment because they were heavy-duty towers. As it turned out, the towers from Anzac were too large, I thought, at the time. Retrospectively, not true when you look at it today, but at that time I thought the towers were too large in any event, so I proceeded to dispose of them and actually did very well and made some good money on those towers because they were sold mostly to CFRN Television, who installed them in various sites around northern Alberta.
Hi, I'm Tim Dancy. The use of cable to transmit broadcast signals goes back to World War II, when Britain turned to transmission of radio signals as a wartime security measure. 10 to 15 years after, small, primitive, early television cable systems began to pop up around North America. Crude and very limited in its infancy, like many good ideas, in time, evolved into a multi-billion-dollar industry on an international basis. In the early 70s, many of us were treated to a form of television explosion in Edmonton. The emergence of cable TV and the option of subscribing to up to 13 channels, including 3 U.S. networks, PBS, and local network affiliates and more, proved very acceptable to many viewers. No longer were Edmontonians forced to watch 2 local English and 1 French channel with varying visual qualities. But the concept and technology didn't just appear in 1970. Primitive cable systems were toyed with in Britain, the U.S., and Canada from as early as the late 1940s. Ed Polanski, a founder of QCTV in Edmonton, referred to in the provincial archives as the father of Alberta Cablevision, developed an early system in Athabasca, Alberta, site of one of the West's first cable operations.
First of all, tell us how it was that you got inspired to begin in this business.
Like all things, it occurs by reason of need, and where I was operating a radio and television store, people wanted to see television, and the first site of television, probably the first site of television in Alberta, was not Alberta Television, but in my own case I brought a television receiver from Ontario, which I hand-built at a technical college there in 1952, and I brought it to Canada, to Alberta in 1953, and had many farmers coming to my store to watch something that was at that time called DXing, or long-distance freak reception. And over the period of about 6 or 8 months, we logged some 46 American television stations that we watched on a sporadic basis, the farthest of which was Amarillo, Texas, just north of Edmonton here. So the very early television was freak reception, and people sat there for hours talking about things around home, and then when the reception came on, they would stare at the box for 2 or 3 minutes or 20 minutes, and then it would fade out, and then they'd go back to their own gossip. That's how it first started. The first television station that came on the air in Edmonton was in November of 1954, which was CFRN. But prior to that, it was anyone that had a television set simply watched this freak reception. Immediately following the on-air initiation of CFRN television, people wanted television sets. In my case, in the community in which I lived, People wanted to buy sets but couldn't get adequate reception with normal antennas, mostly because there was a great deal of power line interference, and CFRN's broadcast signal originally was a low power signal, the result of which was that reception was very poor. So people were looking to buy television sets, but they wanted their television set reception to be adequate. I get caught in this peripherally because they said to me, well, we would like to have reception at our place like you have in your TV shop. And in my shop I had a small cable system with a high tower and very sophisticated antennas and cable into my store, and the people simply wanted that reception. So I ended up having to hook them up to my system, as it were, and that was the start of my first system, which was in 1954. Actually, the Edmonton cable television idea was spawned by others. It wasn't by me. I was invited by a group of Edmonton business people to investigate the possibility of filing a license because I had already been in operation. The Edmonton business people visited the town of Athabasca. They looked at the system in operation there and felt that it would be in their interest to invite me in as a partner to join them in Edmonton, and that was really the start of it.
Construction of QCTV was a difficult task because it entailed the placement of some 450 miles of cable plant. It was only because cable represented choice, that is, more than one TV station or more than two stations, that it caught on with the public. But overall, it was a tough start. The bankers didn't like the business. They didn't want to finance it. You couldn't acquire shareholders into it. The technology was poor. Government officials, such as municipal governments, didn't want to deal with cable companies. My first contract for pole rights had to do with placing a bond to remove the wires once I went broke.
This was a private company with limited shareholders, and the banks, not having really any great experience in cablevision, were somewhat hesitant to go too far out on a limb.
At the same instant that Edmonton was licensed, Calgary was licensed, and so that there was a cooperative network of cable systems who had to get together and determine a selection, the selection of a common receiving site, having as the background the requirement by license that the receiving site for American stations had to be on the Canadian side of the border. It was not allowed to be on the American side of the border. So in the search for a location from which there were broadcast a number, in fact all three American networks, we didn't find any suitable site straight south of Calgary. There weren't three networks broadcasting out of Great Falls, Montana, for instance. The only place there were three commercial networks and a public service network was out of Spokane, and then farther west out of Seattle. So then we began a search in southern British Columbia near the border to determine whether there was a mountaintop suitable for the selection and pickup of these stations. There was a large reception site on top of a place called Mount Kelly, south of Salmo, British Columbia. And on that site, we pick up all of the American signals that are available out of Spokane, including a new one that has come on the air within the last couple of years. So there are at least 5 good signals available there. The signals are then fed into the Trans-Canada microwave system, which on the BC side of the border is operated by BC Tel, on the Alberta side by AGT. And so with a contractual agreement between BC Tel, Alberta Government Telephones, the signals were fed into their network and brought up to Edmonton and Calgary and so on.
Following some years, perhaps 20 years, it came into its own, and banks and governments began to realize that it was and could continue to make substantial contributions to society, and then they began to embrace it in the total broadcasting system. The whole process started in about 1978 to acquire communities, and it was 30 communities rather than 25, which is what we ended up with. So we now are a citizen, corporate citizen of the town of Ponoka and Lacombe, and we like that. We think that's good. We'll come into town and we'll vote on your issues, and we'll We'll try to keep your taxes down and all of those other things. We might even argue with the mayor. You know, if the mayor argues with us about tearing up his streets, well, we'll argue with the way he raises taxes. So as a corporate citizen, you get sort of reciprocal rights.
Mr. Chairman, our appearance before you today can be considered an extension of our purpose when we appeared before this commission as an intervener and before you as the chairman, Mr. Fortier, at the CRTC public hearings in Winnipeg on June the 9th.
I wanted to ask you about this, this present proposal. There would be an earth station in each of these small communities that you would own.
That's correct.
And there would be a cable system in each of these small communities that you would apply for a license for, and you would build the cable system.
That's correct. Was it hard to get these 25 communities? I think the answer is yes. I think the answer to that is it was an extremely difficult task because it took a couple of years of hard work having to do with technical research. We did a lot of work with communities. We did a lot of work with Alberta government telephones. The end result of it was that of having filed for 30 communities, the CRTC saw fit to license 25 of them to us, rejecting the Peace River block, which had 5 or 6 communities in it.
When we came up for a license renewal in Edmonton, with a system of 60,000 subscribers, we didn't have one negative intervention. When Mr. Nelson came up with his system for Hinton, he had a petition with 500 names on it intervening against his company in Hinton. It does say something about the fact that certain size of systems have certain operating modes, and we're speaking to the raising of the level of professionalism in small systems. And I would defend with my life the need to try to preserve small system operators. We've said
there are a number of interesting background factors involved with pay television. First of all, there was the Minister of Communications who was a Madame Sauvé at the time, and she had announced about 5 years prior to 1983, in fact in about 1978, that pay television was, quote, inevitable, end of quote. The fact is that 5 years later, in 1983, it was only being licensed. That wasn't bad in itself, except other events overran pay television. In 1978, when Madame Sauvé said pay television was inevitable, there were no satellite systems yet available to the people. VCRs were nowhere to be found. They were talked about. There were no home movie rental stores. And so there, in effect, was no competition for pay television in Canada in 1978.
And improving.
How has cable television played a role in your life?
It's made the world a lot closer together. I mean, you get the news from all areas instead of one-sided or a biased opinion. Other than that, it gives you more entertainment.
No, we really enjoy as many channels as possible.
I just generally get about 7 or 8 channels. I'm not onto the 6-pack or anything like that, so I do enjoy the news from Canada, Alberta, and from the United States, keep me abreast on the world situation. Other than that, I'm not into, other than sports like hockey, you know, it hasn't really changed me too much.
Has it been an enrichment of your own life, so to speak?
Well, I guess so. Not only that, made us more couch potatoes.
Television, for all the good things that it is and can do, also has the attention and power to influence adversely our established human values.
The public speaking issue became important as a way of taking one away from the daily problems and the daily tasks within a company and allows you to focus on a subject that someone else is interested in. And I would take all speaking engagements that came along as a way of trying to look at the world through different eyes.
There's absolutely no question about the fact that television is the strongest of all communications media in terms of the attention it receives from the mass public.
The sale of QCTV was a matter for the board of directors to decide based on the various prices that parties were prepared to pay to purchase the company. The decision of whether it was sold at the right time or the wrong time really is an individual decision, and I guess every shareholder and director would come to a different decision as to timing, and one can't really speculate whether it was right or wrong. It was right at the time, and people then have to live with the results and consequences of that decision.
Well, I think he's going to be sad at leaving, in that he's had employees that he's had for years, and he's enjoyed building the company from a little office in our home. But also I think it's time for new things.
My motivation has come from my wife, who has been one superb supporter in ways that she doesn't even know. And I'll give you the for instance. The for instance is that she has had the intelligence and the foresight to give me the freedom to be able to get out there and work till 11 or 12 o'clock at night without any hassle.
I've been very pleased with my wife, who has understood fully the requirements and commitments that business requires, and to that extent she has been always fully supportive and always fully understanding of what it takes to carry on business. And she's also given me the freedom to do all the things that are necessary in business in order to accomplish what needs to be done.
If Phyllis would do something for me, and I know most other people here in the room, because I know we're all here tonight with a great deal of love and affection for this very special man. And Phyllis, would you please give Ed a great big hug for all of us? Thank you, and you'll all have an opportunity to meet and chat with Ed during the dancing portion of our evening. Thank you very much.
Let's tell you a story about a man named Ed, a poor cable man, barely kept his family fed. And then one day he was working in a shop, and up from his head came a cable drop. License says cable TV, that is. Well, the next thing you know, old Ed's a millionaire. Phyllis and Ed said to move away from here. Manor Estates is the place we ought to be, so they loaded Harvey's truck and they moved the family. Hill, that is, swimming pools, lookout towers. Merry Christmas!
It was rewarding for me to personally watch the staff grow, to watch individuals learn about various aspects of the business, and also learn various aspects about managing their departments, about managing finances, about managing budgets, about managing their area of jurisdiction, and so on. That growth to me was most rewarding, because in that I saw people who were thriving, who were happy, who were learning continually, and in effect making a valuable contribution to themselves, their families, and to society, and to the company as well.
Eventually we got it back up to 31.
Some of you did. I didn't have any.
Family's been very important to me. It's been number one. There is nothing more important in my view than family. And my family has, I think, reciprocated, and they're the best, and I tell the whole world that I have the best family around, and I'm very proud of that.
In the 10 years since QCTV was sold, I was fortunate enough to get involved in a lot of different companies, small businesses, some of which have been all right and successful, others of which we struggled with and are still struggling with. We continue to progress and move in new directions because the economy is changing, the environment is changing, the technology is changing, the information age is creeping up faster and faster on us.